I'm back with the last installment in the Allan Holdsworth lead series. Maybe in the future I'll do more if I have some more ideas, but for now, it's done. I wanted to get this done before the end of the year, so I hope this is a good holiday present for you. Anyways, let's get started. So what I want to talk about is approach notes. Approach notes is actually a concept from jazz, and I actually learned a lot about this from a book by Jerry Bergonzi, so some of the ideas I kind of tweaked. But the basic idea in jazz is you have a target note, which comes from the underlying chord. So if you're playing a C major chord, like this, too much distortion there, but whatever. The notes would be C, G, and E. Those are your target notes. And then you could use any other note to kind of approach it. Usually it would be a note that's a half step below or a half step above, or even a whole step below, whole step above. So a common lick in jazz might be something like this, a half step below on each of those target notes. Something like that. And so I'm just doing like B, which is the approach note, C is the target, and then G flat, which is the approach note, G is the target, E flat's the approach, E is the target, then C. So you can see how that works, and you can do the same thing with a half step above, like C sharp to C, etc. I think you understand how to do that, and you can do the same thing with whole steps, so go B flat to C, etc. So there's lots of things you can do with that. I don't want to go into all those different combinations because you can see, like, okay, that's just permutations. You can work that out yourself if you're not familiar with that, but I imagine lots of you already are. The next step, and the thing that makes it sound more like Holdsworth, is to add wide intervals to that. And what I mean by that is if you go from one chord tone and then instead of going right to the next one, use an approach note that's a wide interval. I know it seems kind of strange. I'm talking abstractly. Let me see if I can give you an example. So let's say if we have a C minor 7 chord, like this. C minor 7, right? So if we have the arpeggio like this, and let's say we want to go from C to E flat, right? Now, what we can do is just do that, but let's say we want to add an approach note in there. If we add a wide interval like C to E and then E flat, so C, chord tone, target, E, which is an approach note, and then E flat target. So it sounds like this. And I can do the same thing from G to B flat. And I can even do it in a few other places too. But that's the basic idea of it, and it gives it more of a Holdsworth sound. Anytime you have that kind of shape where it's this major and minor third, it kind of sounds like Holdsworth. It sounds like what you can get out of the diminished scale and the augmented scale, but this is more versatile because instead of using it with certain chords, you can use it on any chord. So you can do the same thing if you don't want like that same exact idea. I can do from F sharp to G, and then jump up a minor third to B flat. And then I can do the same thing on the next string. So B, C, and then E flat. So I can do this. So you can see that sounds like a Holdsworth type thing, but it's just using approach notes. It's just using them in kind of a different way. So that's one cool way to use them. Of course, you can use them in the normal way, using it kind of like filler between notes. So I could do something Holdsworth actually does somewhat commonly. Start on E flat, and then go down to D, D flat, C. So like this. He does that type of thing fairly often also. So you can do those. Don't be afraid of doing like the simpler approach notes, because those obviously work too. Now, so far I've just talked about one note approaches, but that's not to say you can't do approaches with more than one note. So instead of just doing B to C, I could do B, C sharp, C. And in jazz, that's fairly common. And I can do the same thing instead, like B, D, like that. And you can do all sorts of different shapes. You can mix it up however you want. As I said, there's too many permutations for me to go over, but work that out yourself. And you can even do, instead of jumping between it, you can do B flat, B, C, like that. Doing too much of that, though, it's gonna sound more like jazz and less like Allan Holdsworth. So do that in, I think, more moderation, and the wide intervals will give you that Holdsworth pop, I guess. So we can move on, and when we get into three-note approaches, that's when we're starting to get into more interesting stuff. So with that, on C, I could do something like this. Let's see. B flat, C sharp, B. I think you can see, like, that kind of sounds like Holdsworth. And you can do it another way, like B, B, C sharp, D, C. That wasn't good. That. Okay. Sorry about the little clicks in my recording. I'll try to get that fixed for next year, but bear with me for now. On top of that, there's all sorts of permutations for that. I don't want to go over these because this video is going to get way too long, but work those out yourself. Find ones that you like, and then work those until you can get them really smooth and you have something interesting. But what I really want to talk about is the four-note approaches. So these have even more permutations. I can't go over all of them, but I'll try to show you some ones that I like. So what I usually try to do is put the target note in the middle, like here, and then use the two notes or four notes around it, like, and then mix those up in permutations. So for example, one I like might be like this. If my target note is C, I'll start B flat, D, D flat, B, C. So a little bit faster, it sounds like this. So that's an interesting one. I think that sounds kind of like Holdsworth. I can do it something a little bit different. I can start with D, B flat, B, C sharp, and then C. So like this. It's almost backwards. I think it's the same one as the one I did before, just backwards. Another one, B flat, C sharp, B, D, and then C. Like that. And then same thing, do that one backwards. D, B, C sharp, B flat, C. That's when you probably heard Holdsworth do something similar to that. He likes that kind of minor third downward motion like that. So something like that. And of course, practice these with a metronome. I like to go straight up and down the fretboard like that, like something like this. Or actually, I was going to delay this because I wanted to practice these more because I'm working on these myself. But I think the more you practice these, the better you'll get at them. I would say practice them in like a few different ways because one, practicing them just like that is good because you stop on that target note, and you want to do that sometimes. You might want to have that land on C. So let's say there's a beat going. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So it lands right on that beat because there's 4 notes, so it's, you know, like 16th notes, which usually I would play in. But it depends. But I think that's a good way to practice. But always doing it like that's not so good. Sometimes it's good if you're more fluid and you don't stop on that note. So practicing it both ways, like this. Like that, where I'm not stopping on each note. Of course, you can't do this with all the patterns, just because in some patterns your fingers aren't in a place where you can, start the next pattern easily. But that's okay. Another way to practice this is practice moving afterwards into other notes. So if I'm thinking, like we have been before, C minor 7, I might think, okay, after I do this, if my target note's E flat, I want to move down through the rest of the scale. So something like this. Like that. So I'm continuing the line. So just doing it in place isn't always good, but always, connecting it isn't always good either. Practice it both ways. Of course, practice this with a metronome and do other things with it. And another thing that can be really cool with this, and the reason to practice it going up and down, is doing it with these arpeggio shapes. So pick a target note or a series of target notes, like an arpeggio, and do the same pattern for all of them. So let's say I'm doing C minor 7, like we've been doing before. So I have B flat, I have E flat, G, and then C. They're all in a line. Some other chords are more difficult. This one's easy. I chose that. I want to be easy on myself. So I can do the same thing here. So something like this. I choose one of the patterns. So I think you can see like all the things you can do with that. Of course, you can do that other ways with other arpeggios and things. But the good thing about this is you can really control how much you're going inside and outside. For example, if you want to sound more outside, use more of these approach notes. And if you want to sound more inside, use more scale tones and chord tones. And it's also good because it's not restricted to a certain chord or scale. You can play it over any chord or scale. I think the hardest thing is you have to worry about if you're playing too many random notes. So this is kind of a way to get away with playing random stuff, but it gives you a way to organize it. Because obviously when you're playing outside, you kind of are just playing things that are not what you're supposed to be playing. But if you're just playing random nonsense, it sounds like random nonsense. This gives you a way to kind of organize it and put that random nonsense in order. You know what I mean? Or maybe you don't. I don't know. But I think this can be a really beautiful way to play. You don't have to use it so much because it has such a strong sound sometimes. Just a little bit can go a long way. And if you add all these things together, like the wide stretched pentatonics, the diminished scales, the augmented scales, and this, I think it'll give you a large palette of things to work on, probably a lifetime's worth if you want to. I need to work on these more myself. But even just what I showed you, the 4-note, what they call it, constant structure approach notes, I believe is what Jerry Bergonzi calls them in his book. If you haven't checked that book out, definitely check it out. I'll see if I can link below to what it's called. I forgot the name of it off the top of my head, but it's really good. But these 4-note approaches, I think there's 24 permutations, so that's a lot to practice. On top of that, I'm just talking about if I have this C note in the middle here. But you could do it another way also. So let's say if I don't have in the middle and I start with A, I could do a line like this. Or like this. So that, same thing backwards, but whatever. You can see there's all sorts of places and new ways you could take it. Experiment with these and try the different permutations yourself and find ones you like and practice those. Because obviously, it'd be great to be a master of all 24 permutations, or I guess if you moved it up and down, even more, probably probably over 100, I'm guessing. But hopefully by doing this, it'll give you more to work with and a sound that lots of people aren't doing. On top of that, you can mess around with other things. You don't have to play exactly like Holdsworth. You can do your own thing. In fact, I don't even know if Allan Holdsworth did this. There's some lines he did that make me think, maybe he's doing this. But like I said, with all the videos, I don't know for sure. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to talk to him and ask him. He seemed like he didn't like to talk about this type of thing anyways. But I'm sharing this. These are things that I think sound a bit like him. Hopefully with practice, they'll help you, get your own thing going that's similar to him and push music forward. But thanks very much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't done that, and until next time, see you.